Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, Airbus, what's it doing now? And in this episode we're going to take a look at the article that was in Airbus Safety First concerning an A320 which suffered dual engine failure, unreliable airspeed, cracked windshields as it experienced some significant weather. It's somewhere in Brazil, I think. The name of the airline is not really relevant, but there are a number of lessons here to be learnt. The article focuses quite specifically on the changes in the procedure to the all-engine fail QRH or EQRH and the all-engine failure procedure and the ECAM, and how Airbus changed that a few years ago to make it a little clearer, and the very distinct difference between relighting engines via the windmill engine start or by the assisted start via the APU, and the article focuses very much on that, and the article that goes through the flight data recorder and how the crew that dealt with the engine restarts and the lessons to be learnt there, and the conclusion talks about the change in the procedure and how that's written and the very clear difference to make it a little bit clearer. As with all of these case studies, we're not here to criticise. I think there's some learning points in this, and there's a few others that I'd like to expand on that the article doesn't really go into in too much detail about, as it focuses specifically on the relight procedure. But there are a few questions that I was asking myself as I was reading through it. So as I say, this I don't know the area. I don't know too much about it. I think there's a little bit on the internet if you want to take a further look at it. I haven't seen a report other than what is read or what you're able to read on the Flight Safety First. And Airbus, anybody has access to this and can read it. If you haven't read it already, then I'm going to read it through with you now and then expand on a few areas. The case study, as I said, concerns an A320. I believe it was somewhere in Brazil. They just to give you a bit of background on the story. They diverted to an airport due to some significant weather. They spent about 3 hours or so on the ground at that diversion airfield before setting off again to try and make it to their destination. And it was during that flight where they encountered significant weather. Now, I'll bring up a few figures up on the screen for you here, and the first one we'll take a look at is just this picture here, which talks about the diversion airport and the initial destination airport, and you can see there the significant weather. I'm going to go through each of these points with you in just a moment, but the first thing for me is how the crew, or why the crew actually went through this weather in the first place. And the article does come on to talk a little bit about weather radar, but very briefly, and it gives a few links. Now, if I can't put those links on here for you, I'll include the links of the briefings which I've already completed on weather radar, predictive wind shear, etc. And I'll put those links up at the top here for you so that you've got a bit of background knowledge on weather radar, as it does put the question mark as to what the crew actually saw. But again, something else that the article doesn't really expand on is how the crew got themselves into this situation. So there's a couple of questions that that I asked myself, and you may ask yourself as you listen through or read through the briefing. Is the crew were on the ground for about 3 hours before making another attempt into their destination airport, and you can see that they were pretty much the diversion airport. They can see that the destination was pretty much enveloped in this weather, and they could see very much after takeoff, very soon after takeoff, that there was no real sensible way to get through, other than the path that they believed was the safest option ended up in what we're going to be talking about now with the dual engine failure. So the big question I would ask myself is why the crew decided to go. In any case, was there commercial pressure? Obviously, they needed to get their passengers to their destination. I don't know the topography of the area either. Okay, so I'm making a lot of assumptions here as to whether, and I don't know the distance either as to whether or not the passengers could have been bussed or hotacked or attempts even made the following day, and was there a significant amount of commercial pressure or enough commercial pressure to encourage a crew to make another attempt? And the next question is, what did they see on the weather radar? How did they interpret what they saw? And it's a good reminder of the importance of studying the weather and having a really good understanding of how the weather radar works and what tools we have at our disposal to make an assessment and a judgment of the weather conditions. So before I start the article, just wanted to raise a couple of points there. That the mitigation of this, of course, was to not go in the first place. But I guess that there were some other influences there that encouraged the crew to continue towards their destination, having diverted. And I dare say, and again, I'm making assumptions that the extra sector there and the fact that it would have been there may well have been flight time limitation issues and commercial pressure to get them to get their passengers to their destination. So it's never just one thing, is it? It's always an error chain, as we often see with these sorts of events. So let me just read through the article with you now, and then just expand on a couple of things which I picked up from the article. So the engine relight after an all-engine flame out, and as I say, as we read through this, it does talk specifically about the difference between the windmill and the assisted start. The all-engine flame out is one of the most stressful situations for a flight crew who need to urgently relight the aircraft engines. Incorrect application of the engine relight sequence can lead to delayed or unsuccessful engine restarts, as we will see in the article. This article describes an in-service event in which such a situation was encountered. It recalls the various steps of the engine relight sequence in the all-engine failure procedure of the QRH and highlights the improvements that have been made on the operational procedure of the A300, the 310, 20, 30, 40, 50 and 80 aircraft. So a big change there across the fleet. So then the article goes on to the case study itself and the event description, and this is a diversion to the alternate airport. Now, an A320 aircraft equipped with a CFM56 5B engines was approaching its destination airport. Due to adverse weather conditions, the flight crew decided to divert to an alternate airport where they performed a safe landing at 1840 local time. You can see that there in the figure here, which I'll bring up on the screen if I haven't already. After a 3-hour stopover, the aircraft departed the diversion airport at 21:51 local time, heading towards its initial destination. So during the night flight, persistent adverse weather remained along their route, and the flight crew requested a northward deviation to avoid storm cells that they detected on their weather radar. The aircraft was cruising at flight level 240 with autopilot and auto thrust on when the flight crew executed a 90-degree left turn towards their final destination. So the crew could see very clearly when they departed their diversion airfield that they couldn't make an immediate turn left. So it took a more northerly routing to hopefully get round the back of that weather. Doesn't really give much information on flight time on that, and I don't know if the picture here is to scale. So again, lots of assumptions, but they obviously felt as if they could make a 90-degree left turn at some point towards the destination. So that would be what my question would be: what did they see on the weather radar, and what led them to believe that that was the safest course of action? The article then goes on to severe storm and dual engine flameout. Now this was quite significant, as I'll read through, because the aircraft sustained some significant damage as well as unreliable airspeed, which was due, I believe, to the radome becoming destroyed. And I've got some pictures here to show you as well. Shortly after the turn, that's a 90-degree turn to the left, the aircraft encountered severe turbulence and hail. So this is a significantly developing cumulonimbus. Loud impact noises were heard, and both the left and right windshield sustained damage. Several ECAM alerts were triggered, including anti-ice right windshield, anti-ice left windshield. That will be because of the cracked windshields, and engine 1 stall, as well as nav rad out 2 fault. No idea why they got that. The autopilot and auto thrust disconnected, and within 1 second the cockpit went dark. This is obviously as both engines ran down. The flight recorder data is not available for the following 2 minutes and 46 seconds due to the EMA-ELEC configuration. Now, I didn't actually know that the flight data recorder didn't record during the EMA-ELEC, but during this time, the thrust levers were then moved to the toga position. Now, I don't know why the crew would have gone to the toga position. Maybe this was a startle effect. Perhaps they hadn't appreciated what was going on at the time. Obviously felt that perhaps the speed was decaying. At this point, they may have had unreliable airspeed and felt that putting the thrust levers to the toga position would have given them the extra thrust that they needed. So there must have been some confusion at this point as to exactly what was happening. So now they're manually flying the aeroplane in the EMA-ELEC config. Now both engines had flamed out, combined with unreliable airspeed indication. The flight crew very quickly switched the APU on. Now remember, they're at flight level 240, or they were when they initiated the procedure. So thinking about the APU start limitations in EMA-ELEC config, you can start the APU below flight level 250, and bleeds available obviously below flight level 200. When the APU came online, electrical power was restored, and the aircraft pitch was minus 3.5 degrees, corresponding to the pitch provided in the QRH to reach the optimum windmill relight speed. So the crew must have been very quick to refer to that QRH, and if you look at a CEO at around 60 odd tons, minus 3.5 is just about right. The speed, which was unreliable, was showing 232 knots indicated on the captain's PFD, and the aircraft altitude at this point now was 18,100, which is 5,900 foot loss from the initial cruise altitude. The aircraft was in alternate flight control law, and the thrust at this point remained in toga. Now we'll come on to why that's significant in the article in just a moment. So just to recap here, both engines failed, an altitude loss of about 5,900 during the process. The pitch altitude of the aircraft was at minus 3.5, corresponding to the QRH for a windmill restart. The aircraft now, with electrical power restored, having put the APU on, is in alternate law, but the thrust levers remaining in the toga position. The windshields are damaged, the radome is damaged, and this is why they had the unreliable airspeed indication. So some quick thinking there in terms of commencing with the procedure. And the article will now talk about the windmill relight attempt. Excuse me. There's a lot of talk. Actually, I get a lot of questions in the simulator about why the APU in EMA-ELEC config is limited to flight level 250. And you've got to think about the fact that starting the APU is only ever on batteries. The APU works slightly differently to the high bypass engines that we have in the CFM or the Neo engines, and it's pretty much a pure ramjet engine, Garrett, I believe. Starting on batteries only. If you try and start the APU on batteries only at much higher altitude, if you ever started an APU in normal configuration at higher altitude, if you've ever needed to, you'll notice it takes longer. There's a chance there that you could drain the batteries, and that's why when you're in the EMA-ELEC config, there's a limitation to make sure that you've got enough compression to have a successful restart. And that's a similar situation with the engine's windmill start as to why 250 is the level. For a similar reason, you need enough compression in the compressor into the combustion chamber to have a successful relight, and below 200 the APU and the bleed can be used, and then to assist that start. But we'll talk more of that in a minute. But the limitation is specifically for the APU is because you're on batteries, and we don't want to drain the batteries. We want to have a reasonable amount of pressure inside the compressor to get that APU started. I seem to remember, I don't know which article it was, but I believe it was on a Boeing where they had a dual engine and they tried to start the APU much higher on. They had 3 or 4 attempts at trying to start it, and they flattened the battery. If anybody remembers what flight that was or what the situation was, perhaps you can leave a comment. But that's essentially why we have a limit on the APU. Okay, so we leave it now in alternate law. Thrust levers remaining in the toga position. Now, one windmill relight attempt on engine number 2 is recorded, and then the flight crew switched the APU bleed on and performed several simultaneous attempts, and that's the key point here. Both master switches on at the same time, so there must have been some confusion here as to whether they were doing windmill or whether they were doing starter assist. Again, the thrust levers was still in the toga position. Obviously, they need to be at idle in both the engine windmill relight and the assisted start. The flight crew eventually set the thrust levers to idle and both master levers to off before performing a successful engine 1 starter assisted relight with engine master 2 switch left in the off position. And that's why engine 1 relit, because engine number 2 remained off. The altitude was 9,100, representing a loss of 14,900 feet from the initial cruise altitude. The flight crew then tried to relight engine number 2 twice, but both attempts were unsuccessful. The report then goes on later on to say, I don't think they were ever going to ever restart engine number 2 because it sustained too much damage. And in fact, the engines consumed, I don't know how they find this information out, but twice the amount of ingestion of water than they're designed to have. But I think engine 2 sustained too much damage. The aircraft emerged from the storm and continued to the destination airport, and the flight crew performed a safe landing. It was single engine inoperative, alternate law, unreliable airspeed, and significantly damaged the windshields, impairing visibility. So let's just read that again. Emerged from the store and continued to the destination. They performed a safe landing, single engine, alternate law, unreliable airspeed. They couldn't see out the windscreens. I have to say, that's quite an effort. That's quite an effort. So we mustn't forget, and when we've taken some learning points from here, and a lot of questions could be asked about the decision-making process here. But to come out the other end and bring the aircraft to a successful landing would have been enormously challenging. So they have to receive some congratulations at least for that. So there we are. That's basically the flight in a nutshell. Diversion, the turn left through the weather, the dual engine failure. The APU comes on. Successful engine relight number 2 remains off despite several attempts. It never started again. And then a single engine landing, alternate law, unreliable airspeed to their destination airport. And you can see the damage to the aircraft here. It's pretty significant. Actually looks quite nice weather through that left windshield. Right, so event analysis. Unsuccessful weather avoidance. Night conditions and numerous storms in the area made effective weather avoidance challenging. Despite having an automatic radar and performing both automatic and manual scanning, the flight crew entered a severe hailstorm. Now, the article has a couple of links here to optimum use of weather radar. This was an article published in July 2016. I will try and put a link in here for you. And operational use of weather radar on a wind video. Again, I will try and put a link in here for you, together with the briefings which I did some while ago on weather radar and its operational use. Extreme weather conditions. The hailstorm significantly exceeded the engine design and certification criteria. The water ice content was approximately twice the level for which engines are designed and certified, and this explains the observed engine damage and flameout. The radome damage impact disturbed the airflow around the air data probes, causing unreliable airspeed indications and revision to the alternate flight control law. The thrust lever positioning. The thrust levers remained in toga position during 7 relight attempts, and the all-engine failure QRH procedure requires the thrust levers to be at idle before relighting the engine. This prevents any surging. I won't talk too much about that. The article explains it much better than I can, but it explains why the thrust levers have to be put at idle. Now, the article then comes on to unsuccessful engine relight attempts. Now, I can read through this and I can talk to you about it, but it just seems a little bit confusing. But it's actually summarised beautifully here in a diagram, and just want you to have a close look at this for a minute, rather than me reading out the points all the way along. You can see visually why it was never going to start. So you can see that both engines are on. Engine number 2 goes off and then back on again. Number 1 goes off and then back on again. And then the APU bleed is started. So up to that point, you can presume that they'd started with the windmill. Number 2 was never on for long enough in order to see the successful windmill. Once the APU bleed was on, at no point really was one engine off with that other engine on for long enough to actually get a start. And you can see here in this diagram, on for 10 seconds, on for 25 seconds, on for 38 seconds, and then finally on for 1 minute and 46 seconds. But again, at no time really, for any length of time, was one engine started before the other. There wasn't a 30-second sort of dwell time to give the engines time enough to vent, and really not enough time to monitor the engine to see if it was going to successfully start. So with the APU bleed on, you can see here that both engines were on simultaneously, so it was never going to start. So figure 3 here, sequence of unsuccessful relight attempts during the event. These simultaneous starter-assisted relight attempts failed due to the fact the APU bleed provides sufficient air pressure to restart only one engine at a time. It was observed that no ventilation of 30 seconds was performed between each engine relight. That's really important to prevent any tailpipe fire or surging, etc. Again, the article comes on to that in a minute. So the take home from that figure 3, is the importance of 2 things. One, starting one engine at a time, and allowing enough time to monitor a successful start, and the 30 seconds required. Now, the beauty of the bleed assisted start is you can start one engine while the other engine is off and that's ventilating. Give it a couple of minutes to monitor the start. If it doesn't work, you can turn that engine off and then start the other engine, because that's had a 30-second ventilation. And you can just keep doing that. With the windmill, then you can start them both at the same time, provided you're at the right level and at the right speed. And again, give it time, off for 30 seconds, and then start again. But the key difference is it's one at a time with the bleed, and simultaneous starts with the windmill. The article talks more about it in just a minute. So in the next figure 4 talks about a successful engine 1 relight. Now the crew set the thrust levers to idle, set both master switches to off. The engine 1 master switch was set back to on, whilst the engine 2 was briefly set to on, then back off. Within 1 minute and 45 seconds, engine 1 N2 and EGT increased, and engine 1 started successfully. So the successful procedure for the assisted start was performed, and albeit engine 2 was put on very quickly, it was turned off very quickly, and then 1 minute and 45 seconds later, the engine 1 was available. So that just goes to prove the point. Engine 2 damage. The flight crew then tried engine 2 relights. Both attempts remained unsuccessful, and detailed inspection revealed sufficient damage to engine number 2 preventing a successful in-flight restart. Engine 1 became available 8 minutes and 26 seconds after the all-engine flame out. The aircraft altitude was 9,100, representing 14,900 foot loss from the initial flight level 240 cruise altitude. So there you go. 8 minutes and 26 seconds. They were essentially without power, some lessons to be learnt there about the difference between the two procedures. Now, operational considerations: careful application of the windmill and starter assisted relight procedures in the all engine failure QRH procedure for the 300, 10, 20, 30 and 40 and the all engine failure ECAM for 350 and 380 is critical for successful in-flight restart. Now, the windmill relight, in the case of an all engine flameout, the windmill relight is possible at higher altitude. That's between 25 and 200, whilst a starter assist is only available below flight level 200. In addition, a windmill relight enables the flight crew to perform simultaneous engine restart attempts. To maintain the optimum relight speed is important because it provides sufficient airflow for the engine to reach a rotational speed that produces sufficient compression for the air compressor and combustion chamber necessary for an engine relight. That's very important. The optimum engine relight speed is provided in the all-engine failure procedure QRH for the A320, 30 and 40, and it talks about the other aircraft types. Thrust levers set to idle. The positioning of the thrust levers to idle will enable stable idle restart and reduce the risk of stall that may be caused by immediate acceleration to high thrust if the thrust levers are maintained above the idle position. So that's explaining why it's important to have the thrust levers idle. The engine mode select is set to ignition to activate combustion chamber igniters. The all master switch is off for 30 seconds. Now, whether you're doing a windmill relight or starter assist, after an attempted start, they have to be switched off for 30 seconds. This will ventilate the combustion chambers to prevent any residual fuel before the first relight attempt and between relight attempts. Failure to ventilate the engine may result in engine stall, an EGT overlimit, tailpipe fire, or an unsuccessful relight attempt. So some very important steps there. You can have a bad day, I think, if after trying to start an engine, it's stalled, EGT overlimit, a tailpipe fire, or an unsuccessful relight attempt. Yeah, that's a bad day, isn't it? All engine master switches to on can be simultaneously set to on for windmill relight attempts, and monitor the engine parameters for at least 30 seconds. So monitor the EGT and N2 for signs of a relight for at least 30 seconds. If increased N2 and EGT is observed, continue with the relight attempt. If not, then switch it off, leave it for 30 seconds, and then try again. Successful in-flight windmill relight can take up to 2 minutes. So if after those 30 seconds you see an EGT increase and you start to see N2 increase, then you can see that it's starting, but it can take up to 2 minutes. Repeat attempts if no restart occurs. If no relight appears within 30 seconds or no sign of a relight within 30 seconds, switch both engine master levers to off for 30 seconds to ventilate the engines and repeat the relight attempt until successful or until reaching flight level 200 where a starter assist can be attempted. Now, figure 6 talks about the windmill relight sequence, simultaneous relights, and it's very clear in there. Switch the engines on. If unsuccessful, turn them both off for 30 seconds. Then after the 30-second dwell time, both can go on. Monitor the EGT and N2 for a minimum of 30 seconds. If no sign of a relight, start the process again, off for 30 and then back on. Just remember that is for a windmill relight attempt. Now, below 25 to flight level 200, if the windmill relights haven't been successful, then we can commence with the starter assisted relight below flight level 200. Now, the all-engine fail QRH procedure requests to start the APU when below the upper limit of the APU battery restart envelope, enabling recovery of the electrical power and the use of the APU. Now, below 200, if the wheel wheel relight was unsuccessful and the APU is available, the flight crew can attempt a starter-assisted relight. Thrust levers go to the idle position. We've explained why that's important. The engine mode selector goes to the ignition to allow ignition into the chambers. Master switch goes to off for ventilation to remove residual fuel from the combustion chamber before any engine relight attempt. The time to perform the next two steps ensure a sufficient ventilation close to the 30 seconds. Reduce the speed to green dot. Whilst the engine masters are switched to off, reduce the speed back to green dot. There's no point now in high speed because we've already attempted the windmill. Now, if we're using the APU bleed assisted start, there is no need. We can now come back to green dot, and this will reduce the rate of descent. APU bleed goes on. Only one engine master switch on. The flight crew must attempt to relight only one engine at a time during a starter-assisted relight. Monitor the engine parameters. Monitor the EGT and N2 for signs of relight for at least 30 seconds. We should see an N2 and EGT increase. If you do, then continue with that start attempt. A successful in-flight starter-assisted relight can take, as we say, up to 2 minutes. If no sign of relight within 30 seconds, all engine master switches to off. If there's no sign of relight within 30 seconds, the flight crew switch the masters back to off to ventilate the engine. Now, two options are then possible. Now, you can immediate relight attempt of the other engine. So the flight crew can then attempt to relight the other engine immediately, since it was ventilated during the relight attempt of the first engine. So you can see where the 30 seconds comes in now, can't you? In giving it time to start. If there's no sign at 30 seconds of the start, then you can just go back to you can go master switch back to off, and during that time the other engine is ventilated, and then you can start the other engine. So that's one option. The other option is a relight attempt of the same engine after 30 seconds. So switching it back off for 30 seconds. Should we try the other engine? Well, if it looks like you've got no N1 rotation whatsoever or N2 rotation, it may well be damaged, and that's another procedure. But in which case, then you might want to try and start number one again if that looked like the better engine, or as it might be the case where they were just a rundown, and then you can just go ahead and start the other engine. And you see this figure here talks about the various options that you have in either restarting engine number one or trying number two. And I'll bring that up here for you. So the article then finishes with the product enhancements. The event described previously led to Airbus to improve the operational documentation to prevent misinterpretation of the starter-assisted relight procedure, including the all-engine fail procedure of the 300, 310, 320, 30, 40, 50, and 80 aircraft. The update of the all-engine fail procedure in the QRH and the FCOM and the ECAM FCOM for the 353. It's also associated to an update of the all-engine fail procedure in the FCTM, and this improvement is available in the following documents, and it lists them all there. We can see here the two boxes is the previous procedure and the improved procedure, and then highlighted in the amber box beneath where the APU bleed goes on. It talks about engine relight one at a time, and then engine masters one or two on. So it adds a little bit of clarity, and then talks about if relight not successful, all engine masters off. For the same engine relight, wait for 30 seconds, and then engine relight one at a time. Try regularly. Important there, one at a time. And then it talks about some flight warning enhancements on the 350 and 380. And then finally, an all-engine flameout is a high-stress situation that requires immediate and precise crew action. Successful engine relight depends on the meticulous execution of the procedure. It's important point that, isn't it? It's a very highly stressful situation to be in, and I imagine with all the environmental conditions that they were experiencing at the time would have added to that significantly. The 30 seconds engine ventilation removes any residual fuel from the engine's combustion chamber before the first relight attempt and between relight attempts if unsuccessful. It prevents risk of engine stall, EGT overlimit, tailpipe fire, or unsuccessful relight. Windmill relights enable attempts to restart all engines at the same time at a higher altitude. Starter-assisted relights enable restart of only one engine at a time due to APU bleed air limitations and can only be performed below flight level 200. Flight crew should monitor the EGT and N2 for signs of relight for at least 30 seconds. If there are signs of relight within 30 seconds, continue with the current engine restart attempt. If successful in-flight relight or a successful in-flight relight can take up to 2 minutes. If there are no signs of a relight within 30 seconds, all engine masters to off and initiate a new relight attempt. The event described in this article also illustrates the importance of maintaining situational awareness during emergencies and correctly applying QRH procedures during an extremely stressful situation. So lots of learning points there. I think going back, it's the correct use of the weather radar. What did the crew see? How did they interpret what they saw? And obviously a question mark over the whole decision-making process. I'll try and put a link, as I say, on the weather radar that was included within the article and what briefing we did a little while ago. Some background information there as to why or what led Airbus to have some clarity to the all-engine fail procedure, ensuring that crew, particularly in a high stressful situation, which this is, excluding any weather which this crew experienced and unreliable airspeed, just to add some clarity to the differing procedures of the two restart techniques, whether it be by windmill and by APU assisted start, and why the limitations are there, and the reasons for ventilating for 30 seconds, and the importance of obviously having the thrust levers at idle position during the start, and also the monitored starts as well, ensuring that you wait at least 30 seconds to see if there is any EGT increase or N2. And if there's no sign of life, back to both masters, back to off again for the 30 seconds before attempting another restart. And a reminder that it can take up to 2 minutes for a successful relight. So give it time to actually relight. Good. Okay. So hopefully there's something in there for you. It's not something that we see in the simulator with any real regularity. And it's good to review the procedure. I don't know if you have any spare time in a simulator, if you're looking at any development exercises, if you're able to. I'm not sure how your company runs your recurrent program during the winter time, but maybe if there is any time, you could have a look at this and just refresh your memory with the procedure, the unlikely event that something like this happens to you. And the importance of having good situational awareness and managing the tasks effectively and correctly in order to have a successful restart attempt. Well, good. Thanks very much for tuning in. Hopefully you found that useful, and keep the plate spinning, stay safe, and lots more coming up on the channel. Lots of recommendations. Thank you very much. Lots of questions about failure management, and I'm going to put together a new briefing on that. And it might be that we do that live stream, and the importance of having some structure to the failure management process. I think a lot of people are coming up for commands now, and this is the time of year that a lot of command courses are run. So it might be we do a bit of a live stream on that with looking at an event, just to put some context to it. So that'll be coming up soon. Lots of other stuff as well. Just in case of getting time to do it all. Anyway, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on another episode in the near future. Thanks very much. Bye for now.